Welcome to the SoLoMo Show, a weekly podcast hosted by Corey O'Brien, the social media strategist at Heat and author of thefutureofads.com.
And I'm Adam Helway, CEO of the digital marketing agency Secret Sushi Creative.
Each episode, we discuss topics, trends, tactics, and tools related to social, local, and mobile marketing and advertising. Our goal is to give you the information you need to be a better marketer. Today is Tuesday, June 11th, 2013, and this is episode number 73.
In this episode, we're going to discuss Apple's WWDC, making the most of search with rich snippets, Google buying Waze, Jello's FML campaign, avoiding smartphone website misconfigurations for SEO, and much more. Always a little bit of a tongue twister sometimes with all these different company names, and the little secret, truth be told, is even sometimes most of the time when I have to say my line of who I am and I'm the, digital marketing agency, Secret Sushi Creative at the beginning of the show, there's something about that sentence that has my tongue wagging in too many opposite directions that I'm always fearful I'm going to mispronounce it. You'd think it wouldn't be the case.
Going to mispronounce your own name? Is that what you're worried about?
Yeah, exactly. Who am I again? Oh my gosh, what if I forget?
Arnold Helway. No.
What if I forget just before the show? Oh my gosh, what do I do about that?
Good thing we have your name written down. Whew.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I always you can't see it, but on my keyboard on my computer that I broadcast from, I write my name right there. It says, this is you.
You are out.
How's it going, Corey?
Recreating your own Memento movie? Is that what's going on?
Oh, no, it's the, do you remember the Jackie Chan movie, Who Am I? Have you seen that movie?
I haven't, no.
Oh, you got to see it. That's a Jackie Chan with a bout of amnesia. But anyways, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Still busy. Still, a lot going on, but a lot of exciting little news snippets. It was funny, when I was putting together notes for this week's show, I was like, I wonder what happened. I feel like there was some definite big events, Apple, WWDC, Facebook making some big announcements. There's E3 going on, which I think kind of sucks up a lot of the PR. I think a lot of companies are afraid to sort of announce things around WWDC and around E3, so some of the announcements tend to slow down a little bit, but we still managed to eke out quite a few interesting topics here, including a $1 billion acquisition by Google. So should be some good stuff to talk about.
What was the last $1 billion acquisition? That was Yahoo a couple weeks ago, right?
Exactly. It's apparently the month of the $1 billion acquisition. If you got $1 billion to spend, now's the time to spend it. So,
the SoLoMo show, I think we would be okay with $500 million. I know our valuation is a bit higher than that, but $500,000 valuation, I think we'd be okay. That sounds like a deal to me.
Yeah, we could probably split that 60-40, be on our way.
Well, what's first on our docket? You mentioned Salesforce as one of the company. We're really going to kind of run the gamut tonight, but we got Facebook up first, right?
Yes, indeed. So we've got a combination Facebook and Salesforce. It was a study that Salesforce put out mostly to kind of promote their own services. So their social.com, you can buy Facebook advertising. So they ran a study to look at, what are benchmarks? What are some of the numbers that people should be buying against? And Facebook managed to get a quote from Salesforce and kind of link to this report that they put out. And being the stat of the week section, there's a lot of statistics that are in this report that I think it's great for people to be aware of. Hopefully, could provide some value if you're putting together a report or, you're just trying to figure out how your own company stacks up. But in this case, there's so much in this report that we probably can't do it justice. So I think, we're just going to say right up front, if you're interested in the idea of doing Facebook advertising and a report on industry benchmarks sounds interesting, check out a link in the show notes, which are going to be available at solomoshow.com. We'll include a link right to the Salesforce report that they put together. And I took a look in it. It's chock full of information. It's looking at ad spend benchmarks across industries, across geographic locations, across all sorts of different variables. What's the average CPC, CPM, response rate, that sort of thing. So a lot of great data in there. But one of the interesting things from the TechCrunch quote was a quote the TechCrunch article was a quote from the Salesforce CMO. And this kind of relates to something that we were talking about in a previous episode about Facebook reconfiguring their advertising. So the quote from the Salesforce CMO is, advertising must be reorganized around people. In the future, you'll see that ads with social context continue to perform better than ads with no social context. In less than a year, all ads on Facebook will have social context, and we're excited about that future. Less than a year, all ads on Facebook will have social context. What did you think about that quote, Adam? Was that surprising a little bit, or were you like nodding along? Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, I mean, it makes sense. I'm a little surprised. Well, is this the Salesforce CMO? This isn't even a representative of Facebook saying this, because they're sort of stating things definitively. In less than a year, all ads on Facebook will have social context. And as of last week, we talked about Facebook sort of publicly saying, well, they publicly said on their blog that they were going to be paring down all the ads that they had. They just made too many choices. Many choices were redundant. It was getting confusing for marketers and so on, who were saying like, well, which one should I choose, rather than simply being able to identify ones that were going to match their needs and then run with them. Just too much overlap. And so Facebook announces that, and then we hear this from the guys at Salesforce talking specifically about the same thing with their advertising, and they alluded to the fact that the sort of paring down and chopping off of all these sort of extraneous advertising units is likely going to be related to whether or not it has social context. And it sounds a little confusing at first about the social context versus not social context. But the way it read was anything that is just essentially put in front of people, and it says, "Look, check out this app or check out this post," but there's no social connection between that app and that post. What they call stories, and say a sort of social experience that happened with a friend of yours, or even something related to yourself, liking a particular brand, for instance, then they're not going to show it. That things that have social connections, say Corey liked something, and because he liked it, it popped up on my feed and told me that Corey liked it, or Corey checked in at a particular location. To sort of increase that visibility, somebody's paid for it to be to have an extended reach and be sponsored. Those sorts of things they're finding is much, much more effective, and that's what Facebook's based off of. So it's kind of like, well, duh. I mean, thanks Facebook for eating your own dog food all these years when you've created all these sort of ads that weren't based on social context.
Yeah, I think I kind of agree. I think that it makes sense. I think saying advertising must be reorganized around people, that's a pretty bold statement, and that I don't know that I would agree with that necessarily. I think that on Facebook, some of the data shows that, yes, the advertising that integrates some of the social data does perform better, but it's not comparing all types of advertising. It's comparing Facebook types of advertising. So,
true.
Sort of these boring sidebar ads versus boring sidebar ads that have social context. Well, the social context are probably going to perform a little better because they've got more information. They've got your friend's face, your friend's name, that sort of thing.
And isn't that what social media marketing is all about? Is actually having social context as leveraging social context in extending the reach of things, or throughout the entire funnel. If you're a funnel person, that's what social media marketing is about. It's about a transference of trust or social proof, or awareness through sharing and being connected to other people, right?
Yeah. So, I think it makes sense. I don't know that there's much more to say to that. Like I said, there was a lot of data in the report, so definitely check that out. And look at benchmarks. Obviously, Salesforce believes in this. Obviously, Facebook believes in it as well. And I think it's just kind of the way things are going. So it's time to reorient yourself if needed around that potential future, and just figure out ways of getting your advertising, like they said, organized around people. All right, Adam, so let's jump into our main topic for today, which is going to be Apple's WWDC, the Worldwide Developers Conference. the big yearly Apple to-do where they get together all of their developers, all of their internal staff. They announce their roadmap for the next year. They talk about things they're working on, things they've been working on, plans for the future, that sort of thing. And of course, we're not going to touch on everything that they covered because there was a myriad of things, many just sort of generally technology related. But we do want to pull out a couple of the marketing and advertising specific features or updates or things that were announced that we thought were interesting. So there's a couple on the list here that we were going to talk about. What do you want to dive into first?
Let's get sort of the smaller stuff out of the way. It seems that with their operating system, and I don't know if I saw this alluded to when it came to the mobile operating system, but with OS X Mavericks, which is their new desktop operating system coming out in the fall, that they've now more tightly integrated Twitter into it and also LinkedIn. And made those available as well for anybody who decides that they want to, use part of their API for other apps that are based on the OS X operating system. But things like Safari, for instance, will sort of pull in articles that have been shared by folks, and you could see it in the Reader application that's built into Safari. And the Notification Center will also now allow you to pull in things related to LinkedIn and so on. And we'll link directly to the actual LinkedIn blog post that talks about the ways that they've integrated directly into Mavericks. But I think that it's quite interesting to see them more tightly integrating these things as direct parts of the operating system, which they've done with Facebook, they've done with LinkedIn, and now more so, with Twitter, and now more so with LinkedIn as well.
Yeah, I think it does a great job of bringing LinkedIn on par with Twitter and Facebook. I've used some of the integration. It is really nice. Things like the single sign-on, being able to share throughout the various applications, all that is really nice. So it's good to see LinkedIn be a part of that. And I think this will actually be really beneficial to LinkedIn in terms of making it a place where people do turn to actually share links and get discussions going around those things. So, if you've been kind of questioning the validity of LinkedIn marketing before, I think with the new OS X, it should definitely help increase the frequency with which people are sharing information through that channel.
Agreed.
So another kind of interesting update was the announcement of iTunes Radio, which is going to be a streaming service much along the lines of like a Pandora, where you can basically... it's sort of a mix of Pandora and a Spotify type service where you can either search for individual songs and say, okay, play me this song, or you can search for an artist and then let it build a radio station around that with related
Can
music.
You play individual songs, Corey? Because my understanding was it was only radio, actually.
Oh, I thought you could pick individual songs. They showed a demo where it was like, okay, I'm searching for Daft Punk or whatever, and I'm going to play this song and stream it. I think the trick is because you're streaming it, I think that's how they're kind of managing it, but I could be misinterpreting it.
I think it also, what kind of happens is when you first initially pick the song, you kind of create a radio station around that first song. So it'll play that first song and then blend into, things that are related from there on out. So you can't pick. But I was going to say, because if I missed that, that's awesome, because I'd actually prefer that style. But sorry, go ahead, keep going.
Well, the interesting thing, and part of how they're getting away with that is that it's essentially going to be a free service that's ad supported. So, unlike a lot of the Apple services where you pay a yearly subscription, that sort of thing, the default option is a free yet ad supported service. So there's no $10 a month, $10 a year, or whatever. There is an option to pay to remove ads, so everyone who has iTunes Match automatically gets upgraded to the sort of free iTunes radio service. But again, the default is going to be ad-supported, which obviously opens up a lot of opportunity for mobile advertising through audio ads. It's another large-scale chance. It's not necessarily the rebirth of radio advertising, because I think services like Spotify, like Pandora, have been doing this for quite a long time, but as with most things, when Apple enters a market, they do so with force. So there's going to be plenty of audio advertising inventory going around. And for those brands that are already doing sort of radio type advertising, I think it's going to be a really interesting channel to take advantage of. And we kind of have to wait and see if they roll out things similar to what Spotify's done with actual imagery to go along with the audio ads, but seems like some fertile ground to play in there, and I look forward to checking that out and seeing what they offer to advertisers.
Yeah, if you've looked at sort of as mobile was finally starting to be, specifically mobile advertising a couple of years ago, we always show, or we usually talk a little bit about Mary Meeker's presentation at, I think, it's either All Things D or the Web 2.0 conference. I'm not sure which one it is, but she always talks about sort of the state of the web and predictions for the future. And one of the things you always see is that there is an abundance in inventory for advertising on mobile platforms, but not enough, an abundance of space, of shelf space available for marketing and advertising that people are not taking advantage of on mobile devices specifically. And part of that is because people are not sort of privy to the fact that mobile is sort of a different ballpark to be playing in. And then secondly, it's because, quite honestly, most of the people that you should be able to advertise with, social networks and advertising platforms and those sorts of things, are still trying to feel their way out and figure out how to make it work. I think it was 3 years ago or something. Maybe we were still doing the show at the time, which some of them means about a year and something ago, that folks were essentially sticking their foot down and saying mobile is what we're concentrating on over the next year. I think Facebook did that. Google, I know for sure, did that. Apple's never really said it in that way, but they've invested into their iAds platform and other things. And when you looked at statistics, usually Pandora was the leader in mobile advertising, actually. And I've not really been able to dive deep into whether it was due to, because they do have, actual display ads in their app as well, like on the mobile device. But of course, when you're listening to the radio, you're not staring at your device all the time. You're not actually looking directly at it. And like you were saying, Corey, in a lot of the cases, the ads actually correlate to the visual ads correlate with the audio ads. So I don't know if this is going to be something that Apple inserts iAds into, or sort of adds audio units to the iAds. But I think due to the nature of sort of having your head plugged in to headphones and listening to music for an extended period of time, when you're on Facebook, you sort of dive in and dive out. Even though Facebook, you do it for an extended period of time. A tweet, maybe you do it a little bit shorter than that. But the length of the session when you're using something like a Pandora or Spotify could be hours potentially. And so it's very much akin to listening to terrestrial radio. And so therefore there's some pretty interesting opportunities for that. So I think, although it's not, like you said, revolutionary and different than what a lot of other folks have provided, once Apple gets into it's big things, because they've got a lot of people using their devices and a lot of reach. And it's table stakes. If Apple wants to do audio, they have to do something like this, and they can make revenue off of it.
Yeah, so I got some real-time follow-up. You are correct. You can choose the first song, but then it does build a radio station around it, much like Pandora. So some interesting implications for that. One being it's a sort of passive listening arrangement, so you're not picking and choosing songs and really actively like, what's my next song going to be? It seems like the thing where you kind of set it and forget it. So it'll be interesting to see what the ad response for that is, because maybe it's more kind of background type music versus something, you've got your specific playlist that you like to work out to or something like that. But, interesting nonetheless. And like you said, plenty of opportunity for Apple to make a big splash in the audio advertising world.
Flat design, Corey. Flat design.
Flat design. Let's dive in. So flat design was the big announcement for iOS 7. Basically, since the introduction of the iPhone, iOS has looked pretty much the same. They've made quite a few changes behind the scenes, but the external facing look and feel of the operating system stayed the same. But with iOS 7, that's all been forgotten. It's a brand new look, brand new feel. Everything is new from the ground up. Johnny Ive basically, came in 7 months ago and said, look, we're switching it all up. It's time for a refresh. And the word of the day, the phrase of the day is flat design. Though that's selling a little short because there is some depth and there is some interesting things going on with layering and that sort of thing. But what do you think, Adam? Did the flat design look and feel wow you, or were you left a little underwhelmed?
It wasn't necessarily the flat design thing. I mean, there were some takeaways from that. I don't know. I'm trying to make sure that the fanboy voice doesn't come out when it comes to talking about this. I think what's interesting is the sort of very animated experience, like you said, that it feels more interactive and stuff. The layering that they've done, where technically it's called parallax, but essentially when you scroll or do things at certain angles rather than everything sort of scrolling all together, it almost does it. It's like if you were driving in a car and through a countryside, and you had fields of corn in front of you, you had a home in the back, and then you had sort of the hills behind that, and then huge mountains back there. Everything seems to sort of scroll past you at different speeds in real life. And that same effect is kind of added to some of the things that they're doing here, and in addition to some other cool stuff. But the design itself, there are some weird, goofy icons and all that sort of thing. But what they've done is they've really just distilled it down to only what it needs to be. And this is, as somebody who has, my background is design. This is my takeaways is, Apple was the first to make this mobile computing paradigm feel okay for users. They grabbed the iPhone, people of all ages, people that were savvy and not savvy, and they grabbed it and they understood how to use it. And that was partially because of a great user experience in regards to gestures and all that sort of thing, the interaction elements, but also very much because certain things that Apple's done, both on the desktop operating system and the mobile one, they've made feel or look like things that were familiar to people. So things like the calendar with the stitching and the paper and all that sort of thing. To some people, and they call those skeuomorphs or something like that. I always play around with that name in my head and try to pronounce it correctly. But essentially creating digital things that look like real life things. I believe that it was very much a necessity early on for that to be the case when Apple created it, because those who are not technologically savvy needed to have sort of a connection in their head to understand how you could swipe something like and go to another page because it looked very paper-like, or you could see the edge of the page sort of move over and so on. But because that's been 5-6 years ago already, people and Daring Fireball, John Gruber, why do I feel like I'm saying the wrong name, but you're nodding there, Corey, am I right?
Yeah, that's right.
John Gruber had a great post the morning before where he essentially said that very same thing, that touchscreens are everywhere. Touchscreens are a familiar part of our pop culture, are a part of our digital sort of interfacing on a day-to-day basis, the way that we do things on many levels beyond just smartphones and tablets in some cases. And so therefore the mainstream populace is used to interacting with them now. And because of that, these sort of skeuomorphs don't need to be here anymore. These things that look like old things that a lot of us don't even use anymore, because you've got digital natives, for instance, where the podcasting app on the iPhone looks like a reel-to-reel or like a cassette tape. And who uses a cassette tape anymore? You know what I mean? There's a few people that do, but none of the young folks who've grown up in an age of MP3s. So to me, the flat design is sort of almost like the ultimate evolution or close to the ultimate evolution of removing all the superfluous stuff. And it might feel a little less sort of substantive to some people, but in a way what it's doing is it's allowing your content and it's allowing the information to become the star rather than the interface becoming the star. The interface should really sort of get out of the way and only be there when it's needed. And so sort of that's my stance on it. I was wowed in the sense that the change was so dramatic. And, Windows Phone has had some similar looks and feels, and people said, well, they're the ones who did it first. I don't think it's about who invented anything. It wasn't an invention. It really is sort of a state that everybody needs to get to at some point in time in certain types of scenarios. So, for instance, the web, the computer is likely going to follow suit and has started to do so, at least on OS X. And many of the other interfaces that I think we use are going to start sort of receding, and the information is going to start to be the star more often. And I think that's what sort of Apple has claimed, at least with their operating system, regardless of who else has already done that.
Yeah, so Apple did put out a design guide, which I think is kind of chock full of some interesting bits of information for brands and mobile applications that want to get a jump start on adapting to this new flat look and feel. So just quickly reading through a couple of these, because I think kind of reading them in mass, you get a feel for the types of changes they made. So number one is redesign custom bar button icons. That's the bar along the bottom. In iOS, bar button icons are lighter in weight and have a different style. Number two is prepare for borderless buttons. They have removed borders on a lot of buttons. So basically it's just a clickable word now, much like a web link. Next is examine your app for hard-coded UI values. There's going to be a lot of fluid layout, auto layout, that sort of thing. Next, you got to examine your app for places where the metrics and styles changes of UIKit controls and views affect the layout and appearance. So a lot of, again, kind of mobile layouts, new appearance across the board. Make sure your app doesn't respond inappropriately to the new control center gesture or to a navigation controller swipe. So there's a lot of new swipe gestures with
Swipe or no swiping. Sorry, I just had to say it.
Swipe or no swipe. So basically, things layered on top of one another. You're going to be bringing control center controls up on top of the app, and it'll have a semi-transparent look and feel to it. So they want to make sure that if you've got an application, you're not kind of taking over those gestures because suddenly your custom gesture isn't going to work. And then last but certainly not least, revisit the use of drop shadows, gradients, and bezels. So, look at the app. If it doesn't look like the rest of iOS 7, it might be time for an upgrade, which I think signals a larger point. I think it signals that, where Apple goes, many other follow. I predict that we're going to see a shift in mobile app design, or a continued shift in mobile app design towards this flat look, this very color forward, using color and using typography and that sort of thing to indicate areas where you can interact with. I think we're going to see that more and more in the mobile space. So, take a look at what Apple's doing for a peek into the future. And, I wouldn't be surprised to see a lot of companies follow suit and kind of follow Apple's lead here.
Quickly, what it reminds me of is when I started using Photoshop in sort of the earlier days of the web, and I'm talking about, 95 or 96 or maybe a little bit later than that, that everything that everybody wanted to do with Photoshop had to do with using bevels and glossy stuff and drop shadows and everything. And so web design, as archaic as even the code was at the time, the look and feel when people were starting to really get their hands on Photoshop ended up just going too far. And then the whole sort of Web 2.0 look as well was always sort of, logos being sort of bubbly and everything's sort of bubblegum, shiny, glossy. And Apple was an instigator of that with their rounded stuff with the gloss on it. And so I think it's almost like, let's get past all these things that these tools allowed us to do and really design things based not off of what the tools allow us to do, but based, again, off of showcasing information and content. The two being different in the sense that information is what's retrieved and shown from external sources, and content is what you yourself are generating. For instance, photos. Why should photos have all this extraneous stuff that kind of ruins the experience of looking at a photo when it can all recede and you can just sort of appreciate what you're looking at, or video and those sorts of things. So I think it says a lot that they've come up with this guide here for folks. So the reason we bring it up to you guys as listeners is to look at this, check it out, and think about how you might integrate it, I think, not only into your next application if you decide to do that for your brand, but also potentially for your next website, or or even your Android app or any of the other platforms that you're on. See what the merits are behind these guidelines and their new approach at Apple.
All right. Well, with that, you know what time it is now, Adam? The lightning round time.
I was going to say the Thunderdome, but that's
Thunderdome
not it, right?
time. All right, we got a couple stories in our lightning round for today, so I'm going to put 60 seconds on the clock and dive right into the first one. Ready and go. So we alluded to this earlier in the episode, but yes, in fact, Google has agreed to purchase Waze for a rumored $1.3 billion. No small price, but hopefully they're getting what they're paying for. This is by no means a done deal. There's still a lot of regulations and that sort of thing that have to be gone over. You know, there's questions about, will this even be allowed? Waze is a service that's used by a lot of different companies, including Apple. So I'm kind of intrigued to see how this all plays out in terms of if they buy it, you know, they probably won't be allowed to fully control it. They'll still have to let other companies access the data. So that's kind of interesting. But, you know, what this signals is Google making a big bet into bringing more and better advertising into mapping and specifically mobile mapping. We even saw Apple getting a little bit into the mobile mapping space with iOS to car integration they announced at WWDC. So a lot of interesting things there. But, you know, I think this is, again, a big opportunity for advertising, especially being able to bring in geodata from the phone. All right, Adam, with 60 seconds on the clock, what's your take on Google's purchase of Waze? Ready and go.
Yeah, I mean, it very much plays into, I think, the next screen, so to speak. We've talked about, we've got tablets and desktops and smartphones, and then people are sort of making their way to the TV right now. And I think the other screen, the other major screen is refrigerators. No, I'm just kidding. Is cars, actually in-car dashboards. And we saw that with the CES Consumer Electronics Show having in-car operating system SDKs that they were putting out there for folks. And Apple's getting into the fray next year by having partnerships with folks. And Waze is like the perfect app to be included on this and will likely be there. And so just like the way that Google is now sort of infiltrating the Apple platform by having its Google Maps and a bunch of other things integrated directly on iOS, now it's able to do so even in the car with the ownership of Waze.
All right at the buzzer. Well done, well done. Let's dive into our second story here. So with 60 seconds on the clock, we are going to jump right in. Ready and go. So next up, we've got an interesting campaign from Jello called Fund My Life. And they have done so by taking over the FML hashtag, which, for those of you familiar with how that's used on Twitter, does not exactly mean fund my life typically, but they've decided to hijack the term and create an entire campaign out of it, which I think is kind of a fun concept. So basically, anybody who tweets out a message with FML in the hashtag has the potential of Jello interrupting that tweet and agreeing to send you a combination of Jello and things related to whatever you were kind of complaining about online. The interesting thing about this is, you know, they took something that's really, really popular. So they've been keeping track since they started the campaign. In the last 26 days, 249,000 tweets have been shared with the FML hashtag. So they were able to cherry pick some of those and kind of engage themselves in that brand. I think this is really interesting, but it also shows that you've got to go in big if you're going to try to make a splash with something like a hijacked hashtag. All right, Adam, 60 seconds on the clock. What's your take on the FML campaign? Ready and go.
When you first brought it to my attention, I actually thought it would be a bit gimmicky, but it was actually pretty cool. And I think that they took what's a really fairly popular hashtag. It's even a term that gets tossed around on Facebook and that sort of thing as well. And like you said, they totally just jacked it. I mean, they grabbed it and said, you know, we're going to really make something of this and really turn it around. The website is really cool. It looked to me like they were reaching out to folks proactively themselves who were using the hashtag, but then also making it available on their site that they have, which we'll link to in the show notes, with the ability to actually tweet to them directly with that hashtag as well, and sort of in an effort to maybe win something from them. So I think it's a really awesome example that everybody should take a look at when it comes to creating a campaign that uses both engagement and sort of an online automation element to it at the same time.
Yes, indeed. It's a great campaign. My hat's off to them for, doing well with a simple concept, but really bringing it to life. All right, Adam, with 60 seconds on the clock, you want to take a crack at our last story in the lightning round?
All righty, let's go for it.
All right, ready and go.
So this story came to me originally from elsewhere, and it was picking apart a blog post from Google in their Webmaster Central blog saying changes in rankings of smartphone search results. And so what they're talking about here, and not necessarily directly as Corey mentioned to me before the show here, is the fact that they are likely going to start taking a look at certain elements of how you handle mobile users and whether or not you do it correctly. And if you do not do it correctly, you will likely get penalized and be shown lower in search results specifically for mobile users. So a couple things that they address is faulty redirects. So for instance, if all of your pages ended up redirecting to the mobile homepage versus their corresponding page. So if I'm on /bar, I should go to /bar on the mobile site, not to the homepage. Then you'd get penalized. So mobile is getting more important.
You went over. All right.
I know. Last week I did pretty good. This week I'm trying to hit it home.
All right, we got 60 seconds on the clock for the response. Ready and go. So yeah, mobile redirects, I think that's key. Basically what they're saying is make sure your mobile experience works. I think that would be the main takeaway. If it breaks, Google's going to find out and they're going to incorporate that into their algorithm. They're not going to send people to your mobile site when they're searching for you on the phone. It only makes sense. If you're trying to find restaurant.com/contact, and every time you click the search result, it just takes you to restaurant.com and there's no way to find that contact information, they're not going to send people to your site. The other thing they talked about is smartphone only errors. So, if you have things like a 404 page, or if, it's kind of redirecting users and saying, hey, you've tried to load this page, it's only available on the full site. We can't serve that to you on the mobile experience. They want that to be custom, which makes a lot of sense. Again, it's catering to that mobile user, really making sure that the experience is top notch. So, I think take a look at the link. We'll include it in the show notes, but basically make sure your mobile site works and Google will reward you accordingly.
They are not second-class citizens. That's what they're trying to say.
Yes, indeed. All right. Well, we covered a lot of great stuff this week, and there is tons more to think about as these stories unfold, especially with regards to the Apple stuff. So, if you have any questions for us, or if you'd like to suggest a topic, give us feedback, or hey, even if you just want to say hello, we highly encourage that. The easiest way to reach us would be to contact us via Twitter. We are both available at SoLoMo Show, or you can reach myself directly. I'm at Corey O'Brien.
And I'm at Secret Sushi. You can also email us. We have a SoLoMo Show account at solomoshow@gmail.com. That's SOLOMOSHOW@gmail.com. We're also on Facebook, where we share some of the stuff going on at the show, during the show, for the show, but actually a lot of stuff between the shows that we like and discover. Even I was educated on something last week that Corey shared there that I hadn't caught there. So go check it out. Also on Google Plus and on Pinterest, where you can check out our episodes there and repin them to your heart's delight.
There you go. And if you don't have a paper and pen handy to furiously write down those links, fear not, because all of the links that we discussed today, as well as the links to the social channels that we just mentioned, can be found in the show notes, which are available conveniently at solomoshow.com. So just load up our website. Each post gets its own corresponding blog post where we include show notes, which covers both the things that we talk about directly as well as supplementary links to the topics that we covered. And then if you even take a look in your podcast player of choice, there should be an option to view the show notes if you don't want to go to the website. So definitely check that out. We encourage you to, peruse through those. It's a way of diving deeper into some of the topics that we cover. And a lot of times, hey, if something sparked an interest, this is a great way to continue learning a little more about that topic. So check those out. And with that, we will call this episode a wrap, and we hope that you join us next week for another great episode of The SoLoMo Show.
Take care.